Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission's Advisory Board earlier today held a special press conference to address allegations of conflict of interest involving MACC Chief Commissioner Tan Sri Azam Baki. Now, this comes after Professor Edmund Terence Gomez resigned from the MACC's Consultation and Corruption Prevention Panel last week in protest over what he claimed was inaction to address these allegations. However, the advisory board has concluded that there was no criminal conduct or conflict of interest on the part of Azam Baki. But will this be enough to reassure the public about the integrity of MACC? Let's ask our first guest tonight, Walter Sandesam. He was on the MACC Operations Review Panel for 6 years from 2009, appointed in his capacity as then president of the Internal Auditors Malaysia, following which he was then appointed to the Consultation and Corruption Prevention Panel in 2016. Walter, we understand that there are many external oversight bodies that monitor the MACC. In your experience, having served on 2 of these oversight panels, are these panels insulated from political pressure?
They are insulated only in the sense of not having people tell them what to do. But at the same time, you must understand that these panels are appointed by eminent members of the public. And the reason they are there is to reflect public interest, not the government, not the MACC, and not anybody else. So this is where I feel the panel should be independent enough and vociferous enough to come out and support whatever it is that is being said, as far as any indications that there may be something which is amiss in the MACC. I understand that this issue, as it were, came out sometime in November 24th when the discussion was held at one of the board meetings. And after that, it took January 5th today. I mean, what has happened over the last 2 months? For goodness sake, we are here to serve the public. And oversight panels are meant to increase the level of perception of how the MACC is performing, as well as to create a positive perception on how corruption is being handled by MACC as well as the government. In this case, this inordinate delay is really inexcusable, and you find media here, there, everywhere, people saying everything under the sun, and everybody keeps quiet, and suddenly on one day today, it must be a blessed day, January 5th, we have a statement. The question is, independent oversight panels are not decorative ornaments just to be there to make it look like the MACC is independent. It is there for a purpose. So please, the purpose has to be executed and executed professionally. If you can't do it, then please leave. That is my very simple. I'm not a politician or anything else, but I'm merely a member of the public. Do carry on, please.
Because you did write the letter to the press, Walter, I want to ask you about the position that has been taken by the board, the Anti-Corruption Advisory Board Chairman, as well as the Consultative and Corruption Prevention Panel Chair. They both seem to take umbrage at Terence Gomez's allegations and concerns and his resignation. Was that appropriate, do you think, their attitude towards him?
I think that attitude, to me, is completely unprofessional. Somebody on the panel, I've sat on both the panels, and I'm not a naive person of the public who does not know what is left and what is right. Umbrage there is unnecessary because a person has raised something up. And even if he doesn't raise anything up, you are a member of the public as a member of the panel, which is, I'm talking about the others in the panel. These things have already been highlighted in various platforms, and the fact that you have delayed has actually cast terrible aspersions on Tan Sri Azam Baki. There may have been absolutely nothing at all in what happened in 2015, and yet because you sat down and did not react as fast as you should have, I mean, this has created an unnecessary tension, and you have people calling for independent probes, you have people calling for all other things. Why? That is all I can
Right.
respond to you.
Well, Walter, what would you recommend at this point? The fact that so much time has passed, there was so much silence in between. What do you recommend be done at this point, particularly in order to restore some of the lost good faith from the public?
My dear Melissa, there is a Malay saying, I'm sure you'll be familiar with it, Nasi sudah jadi bubur. You ask me what to do now. I'm honestly very disappointed because having been on the panel in 2009 when Tun Abdullah Badawi actually set up the MACC Act with all these oversight panels, so much of work that we have done professionally has been destroyed in the mere space of 2 months. And you ask what to do now, honestly, I'm at a loss of words. Now everybody will jump into the bandwagon, whether it's politicians, whether it's pressure groups, whether it's anti-graft bodies, and so on. And everybody will have their own say. And the public, who do you expect them to believe? For goodness sake, get things done and get things done right. It is as simple as that. Over to you, Melissa or Sharad. I'm sorry, I'm a bit emotional, but there is an element of perception involved here.
Right, completely understandable.
Yeah, I think you express a concern about the integrity of the process and the institutions you worked so hard with. So I do want to ask you about, does anything stand out in the various narratives that have been issued, especially regarding the exoneration of Zambaki, the idea that his brother, for instance, had used his account? Do these things ring true for you?
Sorry, does it sound true to you? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes, that's right. I mean, do these things, does the explanation, the exoneration of Azambaki sound credible?
The exoneration of Azambaki is not essentially for me or anyone to comment about, and I will reserve comment on that. But if necessary, then an independent probe, and that is where the LPPR, especially as advisory board, should have come in at the beginning itself, and then that's where your credibility starts, and that's where, if you do not handle it properly, now nobody knows. Even if there is an independent probe and Tan Sri Azambaki is said to be completely overboard, people will be skeptical. I mean, you have created a mess, and it has reflected on a civil service officer. Whether he did it or did not do it, I think that's for courts to decide. We have the recent case where money went missing or got counterfeit notes stuck in between bundles of notes. It is now gone through into the legal process. It is for the courts to decide. In the same way, there has to be somebody independent to decide. And if you ask, every member of the public has his 10 cents worth to put in, but we have to be professional about this. And honestly, now the LPPR and other panels have lost their credibility. You come out and say something, everybody else will say, no, we want independent probe. Politicians will jump left, right, and center. I mean, where are we going as a country when we want to fight corruption? You talk about corporates. What has happened to the basic infrastructure of governments and the check and balance mechanism, which these, if you read the MACC, what do you call this site, you would find that panels are there as a check and balance mechanism. Why and where have you failed so badly? Sorry, I've been very critical, but my issue is not with Azam, but the issue is with the whole process, as you quietly pointed out, Sharad.
Right. Walter, thank you for joining us on the show tonight. We appreciate your time. Former member of the MACC Oversight Panel there, Walter Sandusab. We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This, but we will be back with more, so stay tuned. Hi, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. With me is Sharad Kuttan. Let's continue our look at the recent events involving MACC and what it has revealed to us about public trust and confidence in Malaysia's anti-graft body. Ira Azhari joins us now. She's the Senior Manager of the Democracy and Governance Unit at the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs, or better known as IDEAS. Ira, IDEAS has said that in a statement that it is deeply concerned following the statement that was issued by the MACC Advisory Board Chairman, Tan Sri Abu Azhar Ujang, earlier today. Can you help us understand a little bit more what exactly those concerns were regarding?
Hi, Melissa. So the press conference that was done today by Tan Sri Abu Zahar and the MACC was, on the whole, extremely worrying. So, firstly, I think the number one concern, I think, was the fact that Tan Sri Abu Zahar said that these allegations against Tan Sri Azam was addressed in a so-called meeting on the 24th of November, but we're all wondering, how is it that such serious allegations that has actually been in the public domain for some time was just settled in the course of one single meeting. And none of us know, what's the sort of internal processes or internal investigation mechanisms that went through, if there was any at all. So I think that's the number one concern. And secondly, I think there is a general sort of dismissal of how serious these allegations are. So, the fact that the chief commissioner of the MACC, the fact that there is even, these allegations are even out there is already, a cause that I think would that should be urgently addressed by the oversight body of the MACC. So I think that this general sort of dismissal of how serious the whole thing is extremely worrying. And to top it all off, the MACC or rather Tan Sri Abu Zahar, after that, said that he did not receive Dr. Edmund Terence Gomez's letter, which Dr. Terence Gomez clearly said he sent to the MACC, to the sort of the anti-corruption body. So I think these three things, really are really worrying, and it really provokes for the questions about the transparency and accountability of these processes within the MACC. Yeah.
I read, there is, at least for the lay person, this rather curious repetition of a syntax. I did not know, I was not aware of, in at least in terms of the the idea that somebody's trading account could be used without their knowledge. Does anything else strike you as odd in terms of the narrative that's being used to exonerate Azam Baki?
Yeah, so this whole thing about this allegation that the somehow, this whole my brother did it, and like, my brother was using my account, and all these kinds of allegations and excuses. I think firstly, we have laws against against these things, like using security accounts on behalf of other people. So there's case law and also legislation that forbids this practice, right? So that's number one. Secondly, public offices are also subject to asset declaration provisions that is quite clear in government circulars. So we should be asking the question, has Tan Sri Azam Baki been declaring his assets over the years? Because if he has, then things like this should have been flagged up much earlier. And these provisions of asset declaration are there for a reason, precisely for this reason, right? So that we as the public, or the oversight bodies of the MACC, can know and can flag up these things when they when they come up. So we need to be asking these questions. Has our laws and our provisions been applied consistently to public officers?
Ira,
Yeah.
what do you think are the consequences of these events? It's not just today's bizarre press conference, but also the events of the past 2 months, up to the past 2 months, including the resignation of Terence Gomez from the advisor from the oversight panel. What broader impact or consequence do you see coming out from all these events?
So I do think that the most serious consequence, especially for our democracy, is a further erosion of trust. So we're always talking about how Malaysians are losing faith in politicians and political parties, as evidently has been shown by the handling of the floods recently. But I think, we kind of sort of sometimes overlook the importance of our institutions, and the MACC is one of the most important institutions that's supposed to safeguard the integrity of our political system, of our economy, of our businesses. And the fact that something of this scale has happened, I think, has really, really eroded, further eroded trust in our institutions, which I think is extremely serious. Because with politicians, when you think about it, at least you sort of get a chance once every 5 years to vote out people that you don't trust. But when it comes to our public bodies and our institutions, it's not as straightforward as that. So as the public, what do we then do when we have such serious allegations against the chief commissioner of the MACC? So I'm afraid that this will further sort of give the public a really helpless feeling, right? Like, if the MACC is compromised and is no longer there to safeguard the integrity of our political system, of our whole country, really, then who then are we going to turn to? So this is, I think, a major consequence of what has happened. And I don't know, I'm really, I'm quite afraid of what the consequences are, because I'm not sure how the MACC can come back from this, really. Yeah.
All right. Ira, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Ira Azhari from the think tank Ideas. Another quick break. We'll be back with more, so stay tuned. Hi, thank you so much for staying with Shrad and I on Consider This. However, if you've just joined us on the show, we're discussing the recent events involving the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission. Today, the MACC's advisory board held a special press conference to address allegations of conflict of interest involving MACC Chief Commissioner Tan Sri Azam Baki. Let's speak to our next guest, K. Sundragaran Stanley. He is a program manager at the advocacy group Centre to Combat Corruption and Cronyism, better known as C4. Stanley, what concerns do you have regarding the recent events involving MACC? What flags did it raise for you?
Thanks, Melissa. Well, we are talking here about the number one person that is tasked with heading the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, which is an institution that was actually set up to combat corruption. Now, the standards required here is actually way beyond above the normal standards, because we are talking about an institution that actually goes after corrupt people and promotes integrity and good governance. Therefore, I think it's only right for, this institution to actually lead the talk, and set high standards. We know that this issue was actually exposed 2 to 3 months ago. Now, to lead by example is to actually come out at that time strongly and lay the facts out on the table and be open about it. You don't keep quiet and wait until someone needs to resign for you guys to hold a press conference and explain your side of the story. Now, the allegations are serious. We're talking about a public servant holding millions of shares in a company. And if you say you did nothing wrong and you have kept quiet all this while, what are the standards that are involved in here, There's no doubt that it's not wrong for people to buy shares or run legal business, but when you are such in an important position that could possibly raise issues of conflict, in the present or future, you would surely want to avoid that kind of thing and, set the examples and set things right.
Right, Stanley, I mean, this brings up, you say it's perfectly all right to buy shares, but actually when you're in a position as such as Azam Baki is in, aren't there constraints on what he can do in his personal capacity? And also it raises questions about proxies, right? So, and family and so on. So what are the good, best practices for somebody in a position such as his in terms of their conduct, their personal finances, the finances of those who are very close to him?
Exactly. That's the point here when I said that the standards must always be high, especially when it involves, officers from the enforcement agencies and public officers who are actually in high position of power. The question is, can your son, can you, or can your brother, or can yourself, actually be involved in business dealings that are in conflict or which actually relates to your work? For example, can a police officer, of high of high position run a firearm business, or can an MACC officer run, for example, a private investigation firm or a security firm? Now there are serious conflict of interest issues here, and so this is what that we must make clear, that civil servants, especially those in high position of power, must be clear that they should not get themselves involved in such positions that could possibly conflict with their position of power, let's say.
Right. Can I ask you about the time delay? And that was something that's quite interesting to me, the time between the meeting of the 24th of November and the public admission of it after Terence Gomez had resigned. And I'm just wondering what, I cannot speak for the MACC but or the advisory board, but the question of how transparent they need to be with issues like this, with addressing allegations or looking into allegations of conflicts of interest like this. Will the public now hold the advisory board of MACC to higher account? Because the question is, what else are they not being transparent about?
Exactly, and the fact that you come out so late, I think the issue was first raised 2 or 3 months ago, and you come out so late to actually explain about the issue raises serious doubt on their inner workings and what was actually going on inside, what conclusion they came to, and even after the explanation that actually happened today, Melissa, there's still many questions that are unanswered. For example, people are asking, the number one question that is running in most people's mind right now is, why did your brother use your account to buy shares? Was there an integrity issue involved? Is this a transaction done with all honesty? As I said earlier, the standards should be high. Why is someone using your account to trade? We need to understand this here. The second issue is also, the question is also if he's actually in breach of the Public Officers Regulation Act or the various government circulars that are in place which governs, public officers' involvement in companies, asset declaration, and so. So did he declare his assets then, and to whom was that? What was the outcome? These are things that still are running in people's mind and still not clear, despite the fact that the board has actually come forward to explain the issue. And I think this has really, really tarnished not only the MACC's image, but also the advisory board's image as well, because they have come out really late.
Stanley,
and they are
right,
also
Stanley,
seen, yeah.
Stanley, we have just a minute or so left. I want you to address the larger question of business enforcement nexus, the idea that there's an entanglement of enforcement agencies with business interests, maybe political interests as well. That must be a difficult issue to resolve. But how can we begin to untangle those relationships?
Yeah, we have had many incidents in the past, where enforcement agencies had business links or protect business records for monetary gain. Some of this also involves illegal businesses, like the drug trades and different trades. Now, we should really rethink our policies and enforce strict procedures when it actually comes to public servants' involvement in business, especially, as I said, those who are involved in high position of power, because there's just really so much of room for corrupt practices to take place, And importantly, the issues of conflict of interest must be addressed, and there needs to be proper and stricter procedures in place to ensure that government officers and those who are in position of power, public officers, actually do not abuse their position to run in cahoots with those who are running the business. And this happen in many, many sectors. We're not talking only about MACC or the police, but we're talking even simple public officers who might be working, for example, in the environmental departments. They might have links with certain companies, for example, logging companies and so on. So these are some of the examples that may be happening across different government agencies and so on, which needs to be seriously addressed and proper and not only guidelines and laws to be in place, but strict enforcement to be carried out. And more importantly, in this case of MACC, we really need to see the MACC actually setting the examples and standards high and practicing actually what they talk and preach about.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show, K. Sudagaran Stanley, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.